People, let's start with the feeling. What would it feel like to achieve what you want to achieve? What the brain calls safe is just what is familiar, not necessarily what is not dangerous. So this is why, for example, you see people date the same idiot with different faces, for example, right? Because it's a familiar experience to the brain. Also, part of the work of change is really going through the motion of making things you want familiar to your brain.
It makes a lot of sense to me, because oftentimes that intrinsic fear to pursue comes from a place that you've not been there before, you've not tried that thing before. So it breeds this fear. So really your brain is trying to protect you from what it perceives to be dangerous.
Absolutely. What do people commonly say when they want to achieve something? I must do this, I have to do this, I need to do this. When you say those to your brain feels like it's an external factor that is about to attack you. It triggers a threat response. Only one little phrase, choose or choose to.
Wow. I feel like I'm sitting in a therapist's chair, because I am. Hello guys, welcome to another wonderful episode of the Just Saying podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you again in the year 2025. I remain your host, Sir Victory, and this year, to kick off the year, we are going to be dealing with a lot of topics on productivity, on goal setting, and the ability to achieve your visions. That's one of the things we're going to be focusing on. And today, I have here with me someone who I have looked up to right from when I was a little boy. He's an uncle, he's a mentor, he's a big brother, he's even a father to me in so many ways, and it's such a privilege to have him here with me. He is none other than Uncle Ben. I call him Uncle Ben, but he's Ben Baldwin Anyasodo, and it's such a privilege to have you here with us today. Can we give him a very big welcome to the Just Saying podcast? You're very welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. We really, really appreciate it. Uncle Ben, as I fondly call him, is a multidisciplinary scientist, he's a behavioral expert, and he's a life coach. So when I thought about the topic on the science of productivity, no other person came to mind than him, and I've been trying to get him on the podcast for a long time. So I'm very grateful that I was able to, he was able to jump on the, podcast today. So you're very welcome again, Uncle Ben. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's jump straight into it. One of the things that I've often observed when it comes to productivity is that it seems to me that there are certain people who are naturally disposed to being more productive. In my own experience, I found out that in my own life, I'm not someone who is naturally very assertive, who is a goal-getter, who is someone who, pursues goals and achieves them very quickly. I've had to train myself in some way to become more assertive and more productive in my life. But I've also observed certain people in my life and in my circles who seem more naturally attuned to productivity, more naturally assertive, more naturally able to, set goals and achieve them. And oftentimes, from my own layman's point of view, when I look at myself and them, I don't necessarily see any difference, right? So I often wonder, is there anything that naturally predisposes people towards productivity? Is there something within us naturally that makes us less productive or more productive? So I think we'll kick off from there, and then we'll dig deeper into what are those things, what are the limitations, and how do we deal with that?
Okay, fantastic. First of all, I'm so glad to be here. And
thank you, sir.
When we talk about productivity, let's start by saying what do we mean? What is productivity? If you don't know where you're going, every road leads there. No one turns up to the bus station and goes, I'll enter in the bus and I'll get somewhere. Of course, you will get somewhere, but it may not be where you want to get to. So productivity as a term in itself has to do with quantities or amounts. So the amount of stuff completed or done within a specific time. So in other words, My scientist side comes in here to talk about boundary conditions. There are boundary conditions to productivity, which means you're doing something, you're clear what you want to do, and then the timing to it. Simple as that. So as a result of this, the thing is, many people are not clear on those two, therefore they don't get there. The people that you say are naturally productive, one thing that is common with them is that clarity of, this is what I want to do, this is when I need to do it by. And we're going to dissect that a bit more anyway. And you talked about the science of productivity, so I got my little body here, the brain, to tell you a little bit about how that works. So is there something in us that predisposes that we are productive? Subjectively speaking, yes. So when we talk about the concept of motivation, and intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, I would rather just say, let's keep it simple and say you're either moving towards something or away from something. And so when you know, you're clear, this is what I'm moving towards, or this is what I'm moving away from, we're talking about what really drives your concept of productivity. When you're not clear about those, because again, we're talking about conscious and unconscious stuff. So you may be unconsciously wanting to move away from something, but consciously you think you're trying to move towards something. Well, it becomes a push-pull. Okay, a little bit like, you know, that good old thing that happens all the time. We're talking about a new year here. What do we know that happens in the new year? New year resolutions. I would never do this. I will stop doing this. I will start doing this. Right? We speak at a conscious level, but the conscious mind is not really driving the bus. It's the unconscious mind that is driving the bus. Just pictorially, just think about the fact that we've got all of these things going here. This is what you're unconscious, if you would, because that's the brain stem. We call this the reptile brain. We share it with animals. That's why children behave a bit like animals, because everyone is born with that intact, right? This is connecting to all your senses and your organs. A baby hears sound and can turn in the direction of the sound. It's got your breathing, heart rate, all of that. It doesn't think. This is the limbic brain here, and this one here is the memory and emotional center. Children are born with that intact as well, so they learn by feelings. Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? And all of this, they don't think at all. Now, this is the thinking brain, the logical brain, which evolved over 200 million years after all of these. So it's still a new concept. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things. Now, when we say, "Oh, I will never do this again," we're speaking from here, but this is the guy in charge. And how this guy runs is it familiar? Did we survive it? So when I say did we survive it, the job of your brain is to keep you alive. It's a survival tool. That's all. So you can't thrive when the brain is perceiving a danger somewhere.
Wow.
Okay. Therefore, if you say, "Oh, let's take procrastination," right? Procrastination, people think procrastination is inactivity. Meanwhile, procrastination is simply your brain protecting you from stress. It's an indication of stress. So when you ask yourself in a moment of procrastination, what am I stressed about? You will get the answer, and if you deal with what you're stressed about, the procrastination disappears. So this is how the unconscious mind is going, and the conscious mind is going. Think about it as you get on a bus. You sit on a bus and the driver is driving, and you're going, "Oh, we're driving through this town, oh, through this village, oh, that's water over there," just narrating what's going on. You're experiencing it. That's the conscious mind. And this is why there's all these thoughts that keep flying around, that people keep wondering, I wake up and I'm thinking, I can't stop thinking. Yeah, it's narrating the scenarios, but the driver is the unconscious. The driver decides where to turn and so on. No matter how frustrated the passenger is, the driver will not stop the bus until the driver is talked to or agrees to stop the bus. So until you speak with your unconscious mind, in other words, go in a bit more, and we'll get to that in the conversation, the direction doesn't change. It's almost like you're asking your brain to stop that which keeps you alive. It's not going to do that. So it thinks that thing you want to do is something that the system is not used to, therefore why should we allow it? And bear in mind that what the brain calls safe is just what is familiar, not necessarily what is not dangerous. So This is why, and I feel we're going into different places now, but we'll come back to it. So this is why, for example, you see people date the same idiot with different faces, for example, right? Because it's a familiar experience with the brain. Or those people that you say, this person just likes trouble. Well, if a child grew up in an environment where there was always chaos and shouting and beating and all of that, a quiet environment is not safe in their brain because it's new. They're not used to that. Because according to the brain, they've survived that chaotic environment and there's coping mechanisms to exist there. Therefore, that is safe. Which means because that's familiar. So part of the work of change is really going through the motion of making things you want familiar to your brain. There are many different ways to do that, and I know when we get there we'll talk about that. So is there anything intrinsic inside us that makes us want to be productive? Yes, and it is simply the idea of surviving. Now, are you surviving by moving away from or moving towards? And what is that? Okay, that was a long-winded answer to that question, but I'll keep quiet for a minute.
That was that was probably an entire podcast in one answer. So we'll have to really break that down. Wow. So if I understand you correctly, one of the things that really struck me from what you said is the concept of what is familiar. And it makes a lot of sense to me, because oftentimes that intrinsic fear to pursue comes from a place that you've not been there before, you've not tried that thing before. So it breeds this fear. So really your brain is trying to protect you from what it perceives to be danger.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's an amazing thought, and really makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, let's press deeper into this. So are there any mental limitations that maybe I think you've already touched on that in your answer, our experience, our upbringing, the traumas we had as a child, all of those things, how do those things play out to how we pursue as an adult? Because oftentimes, even from talking with you many times, I've had to track back and think about some experiences I had as a young person that is still affecting me, even now that I'm trying to break through. So how do those things interplay to, affect our productivity now as adults?
Okay, so a very successful man went to see a therapist because what he realized is that he would make money and just really rise, and then when it's very close to the big hit, everything somehow he just sabotages, everything disappears. It doesn't feel right to him. And then when the conversation, the depth of the whole thing was being examined, and he was in this hypnotic trance and just tracked back, he remembered being with his mother, very humble beginning at home, and saw a big flashy car drive by, and he goes, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to be so rich and I will afford that car and buy it for you." And the mom went, "Good idea, but see, rich people die of heart attack." And just said it casually, and his brain recorded that. So anytime he was getting very close to making it, it shuts off, because the brain is just, it keeps data and it walks through checking data and guesswork. It's not as smart as we think it is in that regards. So the brain is a statistical guesswork. That's how it works basically. So remember when we talked about this part, the memory part and emotions, right? It's almost like, what do we know about this? Is it painful? How do you know not to touch a hot stove? When you touched it, it was hot and burnt you. Oh, this didn't feel good. Then you won't do it again. Parents who try to discipline children by hitting them and they think it works, when you flog the child doesn't do that again because it was painful, but they haven't learned anything. And so when they can't get the pain anymore, you find them doing those things because they didn't learn anything. But also it could also mean that while they are doing that, they inflict pain on themselves because that activity has been associated with pain. So you can see how the unconscious mind thinks, I don't want you to have a heart attack, therefore you're not going to be rich. Okay? Or I don't want you to feel the pain, therefore you're not going to touch this. Okay, or like somebody, and this sort of thing we see a lot in therapy, where someone comes very big size and goes, I can't lose weight, I keep trying to lose weight, I've done all sorts of diets and I've done this, I've done that, and then we get into it and it turns out that at some point in their life they were abused, maybe sexually or physically or something, and at that time they thought, if only I was bigger, I would have been safe. And the unconscious mind goes, yeah, I can see to that. I don't have time to make you to go to gym and train. I don't have time to wait for you to grow. What we can do is change your metabolism so it can be bigger. And it does that. And so no matter what exercise you're doing or diet you're doing, that thing has a positive intention, and you haven't given yourself a different reason to change it, so it's not going to work. Because it's going, no, if I let this metabolism change such that you're not eating much and you're doing all this exercise and you start losing weight, you're gonna die because you're gonna be picked on. But until you go back in and say to your mind, actually, by doing this, I'm gonna be safe and survive. I no longer need this weight to survive. Oh, okay, it makes sense. And the parts work together. We all have this idea of a part of me, a part of me, a part of me. Right? All those parts are what we need to attend to. So this is how this sort of stuff works against our productivity, in the sense that what our childhood experiences are the memory bits that we refer back to here all the time to say, what do we know about this? What is the foundation of this thing I want to do, this behavior? What does it mean? Okay, so someone that grew up in the home you grew up wouldn't find it weird that mommy and daddy hang out together or joke and play. What you would rather find weird is an environment where mommy and daddy just don't talk. Yeah. Okay. Now, another person that grew up in an environment where mommy and daddy were never together won't understand what it means that mommy and daddy actually talk. So while I was growing up, my dad used to say things to me like, hey, come and see how to marry. So he would do some things and tell me, this is how you treat a woman. My mom would sometimes say, hey, come and see how to marry. And I assumed that every guy was getting that from their parents. So the same way my parents were talking to my sisters about, raising them to be responsible women and wives, I was also being raised the same way. So I thought it was the same, only to realize that no, it wasn't. Now, as a married man, there's no way I can't be a committed husband, because that's what was put in there. It's some other things I don't understand. So our childhood experiences form the filters. We're always filtering through three lenses, where we either generalize or we distort or we delete. So someone may say things to you and you delete some things and take some things, or you generalize everything, or you distort the meaning. But those filters are filtering through the sieve of your previous experiences and things that were told you as a child. Let me give you one more point before I keep quiet. Think about the typical mindset, and this bit is slightly sensitive. Sorry for anybody who this might offend. I hope not to offend anybody. What would be the typical mindset of a Christian, and let's just say Nigerian Christian person, towards money, for example? The typical mindset, deep internal mindset, is that it's wrong to have money. So
True.
The rich man and Lazarus, the story about money being the root of all evils, the whole concept of rich people doing horrible things to be rich and so on, why we shouldn't accept their monies in church, blah blah blah. So unconsciously you are programmed to hate money, and yet every day you're praying for money. You want money. So there's a push-pull there.
There's a dissonance somewhere.
There's a big cognitive dissonance going on there. Again, this is that sort of thing. Okay, someone was we were working with someone, and then the person said, oh, I'm not making money in my shop. Your shop is strategically positioned, you've got all the nice skills, you're selling stuff that is in demand, but you're not making money. We couldn't work out why until we decided to get into the mindset and realize that this person was really afraid, couldn't even visualize a certain amount of money. When we broke through that, and I'm talking about someone making 50,000 naira profit, as this was all they could. They couldn't imagine anything like 500,000. Fast forward a couple of months later, they are talking about 5 million. Fast forward 12 months later, they are talking about 80 million, 100 million. So it was what they couldn't conceive before. They started conceiving later, just because of expanding, really going into say, what does this truly mean to me? Where's the resistance? Okay, let me take a pause before I continue, because you got me on the road. Go on.
Wow, this is heavy stuff. It seems to me like you're saying, oftentimes when we think about productivity, we think about our goals and our visions. We're thinking about what we need to change externally. But it seems to me like what you are saying is that the major things that need to be changed are internal.
Yes, but let me understand you now. Okay, so give me a typical scenario with the concept of productivity, right? Just give me a scenario like, okay, in this scenario, what productivity could imply or mean or something. Let's work with a kind of use case here.
I think the scenario you just cited was a perfect example. So someone starts a business, right? You've been running this same business for 3 or 4 years, and it seems like you're just running around in circles, right? The results are limited. You have a lot of flashy ideas and things you want to try, but oftentimes you find that the year has gone half, the year is about to end. You either have not tried it, or maybe you tried a little, it failed, and then you shut down. So you find that your life is just not moving forward. You're not making progress as you should. Many times we could say, okay, what can we change externally? Should we market more? Should we buy new equipment? What can we change externally? But it seems to me like what you're saying is that as much as, yes, we should change some things externally, there is also a lot that might internally be hampering us from making that progress that we're trying to make.
Absolutely. So first of all, having an idea and turning that idea into money are two different things. So we're going to be talking about skills here, first of all. So there's skill and there's mindset. You may have the best mindset but not the skill. You're not going to get anywhere. Okay. So if I'm running a business, well, business is about money, period. So am I okay with making money or not? For a start. And it means that I'm not going to be apologetic about making money, because that's what a business is. So if I feel bad to tell you my price, then I need to look into what I'm feeling bad for. Because
if you're too Christian to quote what you feel you are worth.
Exactly. So we need there's that to put into consideration. Okay, so this is going to make money. This is what this is about. What am I offering? Is there a demand for it? A lot of people don't do proper business planning. What's the demand? What's the threat? So who are the competition? Okay, what's the environment like? Is this environment safe for this business, or am I going to have a lot of collateral damage and liabilities? You're going to do all those work first. Understand those things. Then we're talking finances. What's my projection like? Capital, break-even, revenue. What's that? What does that look like? So if I'm starting this business with 100,000 naira, it would, and I'm going to make 10,000 naira profit on it every month. Well, it's going to take me 10 months to recoup my capital. Is that good enough or not? So a bit of feasibility. Does this work or does this not work? People don't do that. Yeah. So no amount of prayer will make it work if you haven't done this work.
True, sir.
Now, beyond that, accounting. Are you keeping a book, record book for your business? Do you know how many sales you've made? How are you selling and all of that? Debtors and creditors and so on. These are skills. They are not. There's no mindset to do with this one. This is pure skill.
Yeah.
Your mindset is then where you start talking about what your business represents, your branding, your values, and how you show up and how you operate. Part of the business plan is your growth plan. When you do your growth plan and you see that you've been a bit restrictive and you're shrinking yourself down, ask yourself why. What am I afraid of here? Now that's where we start getting into the mindset. Looking at the story behind what is stopping you. Okay, so yeah, there's that. But coming back to the earlier thing you said about, is it about changing something internally rather than externally? Yes, it is, because here's the thing. One of the things that gets in the way of productivity. Remember, I talked about there's something you have to do, and there's a time you have to do it by. Okay, which means there's a goal you want to achieve. If you're going to shoot maybe a draw bow and arrow or whatever, you have to aim. You got to be clear where you want it to land, and then you apply the relevant pressure to that. So whatever that goal is, you've got to be clear about it. And okay, we get into the concept of SMART goals. You see, specific, measurable, all of that, right? I tend to say to people, let's start with the feeling. What would it feel like to achieve what you want to achieve? Because in this life, we are constantly being driven by feelings. We are trying to move away from certain feelings and move towards certain feelings. So when you're familiar with the feeling you want to achieve, so when I achieve this, this is what it will feel like. What will making 100 million naira do for you? Why do you want it? I want it because I want to help people. I want to be financially free. I want to build a house. I want to do this. I want to do that. All right. Those are just the backward rationalization. What's the real why? In other words, what would having this money mean for you? So what would achieving that goal mean for you? Okay, and before we even get into what would that mean for you, what's that goal? So when there's a question when I ask people a series of questions that just gets them a bit quiet. One of them is, if you found out today that you're dying, what would you be disappointed you never did? And then I pause, and you'll be surprised what the answers are that will come out. Sometimes they're not really about money. Sometimes it's about something you never tried. And then, if anything was possible, so there's no impossibility, everything was possible, what would your life look like in the next 2 years from now?
Everything was possible.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, when you hear that question, suddenly we are removing your resistances and your buts and your what ifs. It's all, because many people are not clear what that successful point looks like. So if everything was possible, what would your life look like in 2 years from now? Okay, what about 1 year from now? What about 6 months from now? What about 1 month from now? If everything was possible, suddenly you see a path that you haven't been looking at. Or if I say, what goal will be so inspiring to you that you would have unlimited energy to achieve it? So in 2025, what goal will be so inspiring to you that you would have unlimited energy to achieve it? And again, some things start to emerge from there. And then, given what you know about yourself, if you could change one thing about your life now, what would you change? These questions start to take us to the real things that we're avoiding. Okay, and based on your activities and your actions, if someone, maybe an alien, someone that's not part of here, is just looking from somewhere, if they could look in and see you based on your activities, what would they say is important to you? Okay, so, and the final question, if you truly knew 100% that you're safe at all times, how would that change your life?
Wow. I feel like I'm sitting in a therapist chair, because I am.
And you see, these questions, when I ask them, you don't need to say, I don't need to know the answers. These are things you reflect on that just help you, just looking a little bit more. And then with this in mind, that goal will emerge. And then when I have this goal, what would it feel like? That's to show you. Remember, we talked about things we move away from or move towards. This really comes to talk about our values. Your values are like the operating system that run your life. You make all your decisions based on your values, and anything you're doing is meant to deliver on a certain value, and we deliver values through beliefs. So beliefs are little think about a big V as a value, and then B beliefs around it. Some of those beliefs can be limiting, and when you change them, you can still achieve the same value. So let's talk about a common value and main aim of the brain, which is safety. That man being rich means death, heart attack, not safe. He believed that. So the value of that financial freedom or safety could only be delivered through sabotaging the action. But by changing that belief to, I can be rich and be in good health and not have a heart attack, that's a new belief, and the value now can be delivered. So these questions I asked earlier on now take you to really understand what the values are, what's driving you, what does this mean to you. When you achieve that 100 million, what does that mean? What would that mean for you? Now, the answers you will get into this question won't be, oh, build a school or all of that. No, it would then come down to still things like fulfillment, things like financial freedom, so freedom, things like satisfaction. Okay,
peace of mind.
Coming down to one word specific values that can't just be quantified but can only be felt. Now, when you're at home with that feeling and you understand, this is what achieving this would feel like, and then I say to people, get familiar with that feeling, because you wouldn't know how it would feel if it's an unfamiliar feeling. Okay, at some point in your life you felt that way, that's why it is here, which was why you could conceive that feeling. Now find that feeling in your day-to-day activities, in your day-to-day life. There must be something that gives you that feeling today, and the feeling, even if it's tiny compared to the big one you're expecting, your brain doesn't know the difference. And the more that feeling is familiar to you, the more your brain will give you more of that feeling, literally. And so you find yourself just getting motivated more towards what you want to do, rather than getting stopped. Now, here's another very important concept here. You see, because this organ we have in our head, the job of this organ is to keep you safe, to make you survive. It means that when things are being imposed on you, the system thinks you're under attack. There's something we call threat perception. When it perceives a threat, it triggers survival through what we call a stress response. That's fight or flee, fight or freeze or flee. So freeze, inactivity; flee, avoid it or run from it; fight, and there's a fourth one, fawn, which is where you try to negotiate with it. Now, what do people commonly say when they want to achieve something? I must do this, I have to do this, I need to do this. When you say those to your brain feels like it's an external factor that is about to attack you. It triggers a threat response, because and this brain is millions of years old, is not a modern piece of kit. Therefore, it still interprets a red light flashing on your screen as if a tiger is about to eat you. It will flood you with the same amount of stress hormones, which is why angry people do stupid things. It's no longer your wife disagreeing with you, having a different opinion. It's suddenly an enemy that's about to kill you. You're responding like that. It's the way that organ is. So one of the things I found that was worked with helping people be more productive is just a subtle change in language. Because when we say, I have to do this, the brain goes, why? Who is making it? Who's making the rules? And then it becomes stressful. So there are some things, I don't know how many people have enjoyed studying for an exam and writing an exam. Right? until you give yourself a different reason to do that, which is not about I must do it, it doesn't get enjoyable. So now we come back to the real thing, which is your power of autonomy. The God in you that makes the rules. And it comes in only one little phrase: choose or choose to.
Wow.
So rather than I must do this, it becomes a matter of I choose to do this. The brain loves choices, because then, okay, I'm choosing. I choose to do this. When you're saying I choose to, yes. So I say to people, make them actually write down the words need to, have to, must, should. And I say cancel it all and just write choose/choose to next to it.
I'm writing it right now.
And it makes a lot of difference, because even when there's a trigger and you're going, I choose to be calm now, it's your choice. It's no longer being imposed on you, and so your brain is not going to respond with stress because it's a choice. It's not thinking that survival is at stake. So having your goal is one thing. Okay, now you know the goal, you know what you should be doing rather than what others think you should be doing. I'm not trying to do this because it's the trend. I'm doing this, and even if it's because it's the trend, why is it important? Just be clear about that. Be honest with yourself. Then what would achieving this really feel like? Be familiar with that feeling. Find that feeling today, because that's your place of power. And then make a choice. I choose to get on with this. The final point on this is, in terms of what stops people from getting productive, is the fact that we always tend to want to boil the ocean.
Okay. Boil the ocean.
So I want to do everything. Yeah. We just as if a house can just be built from beginning to end just at the snap of a finger. But it doesn't quite work that way. Sometimes so what I believe and live by and also share with people is the concept of all you owe yourself is to do your best. And your best can be different every day. Your best today may be to write 10 paragraphs, and another day your best may be to write just one sentence. As long as you're doing your best, that's all that matters. So for you to be able to go back to the definition of productivity we had as achieving a specific task, completing a specific task within a specific time. So the amount of that you can achieve within that time is your measure of productivity. You should be able to measure productivity. It's measurable. If you can't measure your productivity, you are not doing productivity. You're doing something else. So we've talked about the goal. Now, to achieve this goal, what are the tasks? What are the steps that will get you there?
Yeah.
Be clear of those steps. If you are going to fly to the UK for holidays, you can either stay focused on what you will be shopping in the UK, or look at all the things you need to do to get to the UK. You will need a visa, you need to buy a ticket, so you need to check online for tickets or ask an agent to do that for you. You need to fill out a form to get a visa if you don't have one. To get a visa, you need a passport. If you haven't got one, you would need to apply for one. You need to pay for it. You know, there's all of these things. And if you have a visa, well, you need to pack your luggage. You need to be sure you have the right clothes for the right weather. You need to get yourself to the airport. You need to board the plane, and all of those things. These are steps to the final destination. So what do those look like? And is your timing realistic or ambitious? Nothing wrong with ambitious. So I work with this is my ambitious goal, and this is my realistic goal, and this is my pessimistic one. So this is the at all, the last. When you have all of those, it means that no matter what, you're productive, because you can measure it against the right standards. And you often hear me talk about the 80-20 principle. I talk about that a lot, which is that you need 20% of your effort can deliver 80% of your goals. So what's that 20% that will make the 80% difference? For instance, so in our traveling to UK analogy, the 20% here will be getting your visa and ticket. You must get those. those will deliver more on the trip than studying about UK. Okay, so prioritizing the tasks, the things that need to happen. So you now know your why, you know what it feels like, then you break it down, really. And by breaking it down, it's not planning. Planning is a different thing. It's just understanding what it looks like, really seeing the full picture. So that you now know, step by step, if you want to write a book, for example, the title of the book is not the most important part. Opening a Word document and typing your first word is the first step in writing a book. Okay, and some days you may open the Word document and stare at it and stare at it and stare at it and nothing is coming through. Right, the book I've been working on for a while, sometimes I'll stare at it and then I'll just write, I don't know what to write today, but I opened the file. You know, and for me, I feel productive. I looked at it. So knowing what the steps look like, what they required, and now here's where it all joins together. All you owe yourself is to ask yourself one simple question: what is the next immediate action I need to take? That's all your attention needs to focus on. Suddenly, it's not as hectic. If you are going to cook food to cater for 30 people that will visit you, it could be inundating and everything, and you're cooking 5 different types of soup and this and that and that. Well, the immediate action might be to write a list of what you need. After writing the list, the immediate next action is cost it. The immediate next action is go and buy the things. When you start cooking, maybe you need to wash the meat first before you start thinking of how it will be garnished. Do you see what I mean? So the immediate next step each time is where the attention needs to go into. Setting up for this podcast, at some point the immediate focus was, do we have the right camera focus? Is it recording now? You know, that was much more important than anything else that is going to be said. So I hope this kind of joins it up nicely. Make sure that goal really plays to your values. What is it? What does this mean for me? What would it feel like? I make that feeling familiar, because that's where the motivation really comes in. And then what's that journey like? What's the immediate next step I need to take? I'll take a pause there.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot.